In this video we're going to see another motion modifier, which is the Cyclist modifier. What Cyclist allows you to do is to take an animation cycle and constrain the entire animation of a fashion to a controller object. It is placed upon the item that has the animation. As we have here, we see that there's this car, and between the frames 10 and 20 here, the doors and boot or trunk are opening there under the influence of those bones. And I currently have Cyclist applied to a single bone here. So what I'm going to do is just add a little null, which I'm just calling control there. Let's just put it up there somewhere, shall we? And what I'm going to do is just open the Cyclist panel for this bone here. You can choose which channels that you want to be active or inactive, the frame range that you're going to cycle over. In this case, my animation is between frames 10 and 20. The cycle controller, I'm going to choose the control null that I just added there, and a range for it. The channel that is going to do the controlling, in this case I'll use, let's say, the Z position, and the range along that channel that it's going to go. So I'll just leave this here on the default 0 to 1. Whether we're getting the world coordinates of the item, whether this whole thing is happening after IK, are the same as we've seen in other tools. The end behavior and additive we'll have a look at in a brief moment. So what we now see happens is when I drag this between, well, 0 here, we have the bone at its keyframe for key 10, and when I drag the null out to 1, we get the keyframe at key 20. At present, of course, it seems like I've just got a simple channel constraint here. As this moves on Z, the other thing turns on, in this case, heading. But it is more than that. First of all, notice, of course, when I go beyond 1, what we start getting is a repeat of the animation playback there. That, of course, is the end behavior here, repeat. If we go for ping pong, we can see that it opens and closes and opens and closes. It ping-pongs back and forth with every single meter movement on the Z of the control item. Much of the time, you would probably want the end behavior to be stop. That means that once this thing reaches Z1, that's it. It just stops like that. What this does, of course, though, is that it controls multiple items if you want it to. So we can take the Cyclist that we've set up, copy it, come to these other bones there and just paste it in. And we see that now this null is controlling the animation of all of them. Notice that this is indeed the animation. If I perhaps were to take this guy, I'm just going to disable his Cyclist for a moment there, and at the end part of his animation there, that would be positioned up here, let's say, and spun round like this, turn Cyclist back on. Then we see that when pulling the controller, we do get that full amount of animation. What you'll also notice is that this isn't just blending values. It's not just grabbing the value at the beginning of the animation at the value at the end. If I've got, of course, intermediate animation going on here, so perhaps at that midpoint it's done something crazy like spin around over here, and so it's actually doing that kind of a motion like that. Then if I turn Cyclist control back on, we can see that that is indeed what we get out of it. We get the full animation that is contained within the range, and it is, of course, also sensitive to any kind of graph edit adjustment that we might have done. So if we've, done some sort of spline adjustment to ease in or ease out of our actual motion in this sort of fashion, then that is replicated when moving our controlling item like this, and we get the same slow in, slow out. It also means that you can take a linear animation, as for instance we have on this, bone here that's operating the boot, and you can make it slow in and slow out by doing slow in and slow out on the animation control item itself. Owing to all of this, what you generally tend to get with Cyclist is that folks will use it on things that have to operate in this sort of a fashion, say the landing gear on an aircraft or similar. A gun turret that opens up from a hatch and comes out and turns into position. Rather than having to animate all of the parts in exactly the same way each time you want to open, close, you can hook them all up to Cyclist and just give yourself a single controller that lets you do it that way. We did, of course, notice that there was the additive checkbox here as well, which we didn't yet look at. What Cyclist does, and has done since I believe it was version 10.1, is allow you to add multiple cyclist controllers to the same item. Previously you could not do this, it was impossible, but now you can so do. Additive will also allow, as you can see here on this item where I have made it additive, the control coming from Cyclist becomes additive on top of whatever other animation you might have put onto an item. So it will work additively either with other animation or with other instances of Cyclist. Another interesting little use for it here, of course, the example that is often given is the one that I've just given with mechanical objects that have unfolding opening parts that all work in unison. But there are plenty of ways to use it if you think about it and keep it in your mind. Such as this here, where I've set up a jawbone operating on Cyclist. One of the things that's noted about the human jaw is that it doesn't just hinge straight open, rather it hinges open a bit, then it slides, then it hinges some more, basically giving a motion like this, where we see there's a bit of rotation, then a bit of a slide, then a bit more rotation. And so we've hooked that up to just a single controller here to give all of that action going in on the one thing, so as we're not animating this bone in funny ways, and we can be sure of getting the exact same roll of motion each time that we do it. We don't overshoot on the translation or something else of that nature. Notice also what I have done here. I've put the animation of this bone in the negative frame range. It's happening between -20 and -8, so it's occupying 12 frames of space there. Point is, it's in the negative range, and that's very often where you will set up the animation that is going to be Cyclist controlled, because of course once you have set it up, you would then have your rig just set up from point 0 without a whole bunch of animation on things here in the early part of the timeline that you may not wish to have. And so you can notice again in the Cyclist panel itself that we've got the start frame of the animation and the end frame of it. It's not just the lowest number and then the highest number, it's the actual animation range. And also of course in the controller range, in this case I've got it operating when the controller goes down, so that's from the 0 position into the negative Y position. So there we have it, Cyclist, a very simple little controller to set up, but something that can actually have a nice myriad of uses in your rigs when you've got a repeatable kind of motion that needs to happen in multiple axes or on multiple items, and you want to tie all of that to a single control for quick, easy animation later on.